a really exciting guest. We're really excited to have Jeffrey Gurian here with us. So, yeah, how many of you did your due diligence and went through and you watched the documentary and awesome, very cool. Actually, I'm going to give a shameless plug. I started Jeffrey's book as well, so I'm really excited about that. But yeah, so tonight we're in for a real treat. So let me just tell you a little bit about his background, okay? So Jeffrey, as you all know, he was a dentist. He's he's a comedy writer, performer, director, author, producer, radio personality, doctor, and not always in that order. So he's worked with some of the biggest stars and comedy legends like Rodney Dangerfield, Joan Rivers, George Wallace, Phil Hartman, Richard Belzer, Jerry Lewis, Andrew Dice Clay, amongst many others. And something I love too is like one of the topics you guys know that I love talking about is mindset and overcoming fear and different things like that. So Jeffrey has written 7 books, and his last 2 books have been focused on like mindset, overcoming fear, and different things like that. And Jeffrey's going to talk about overcoming fear as a performer, which we're really excited about because I know most of you, and I know all of us, including myself, can definitely use this talk. So it's going to be amazing. So we're really excited to have you, Jeffrey, tonight with us. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Deneen. It's a real interesting opportunity. I always love doing something with V.I.P.Talent because when I was coming up, there was nobody like that to help us. And I'm always grateful to Alicia. Talented people need a place to go where people can help them. And until she came along, there was really nothing like it. And if it wasn't for the pandemic, we'd probably be meeting in a large area because we used to meet at Caroline's Comedy Club in New York City. And we always had the best time doing the V.I.P.Talent events. And I was one of the speakers that used to speak there. So I was very happy that we're not letting the pandemic stand in our way.
Yeah.
You know, thank God we have this technology. This is amazing that we could do this because in the pandemic of 1918, there was nothing. People had no TV, no radio, no phones, no internet, nothing. You know, it was just a mask. That was all you had, you know. So I'm very grateful that we can do this tonight. I want to start out by wishing everyone a happy and healthy New Year, first of all. That's most important.
Happy New Year.
When I was 12 years old, and I talk about this a lot, I was a very sensitive kid, and I talk a lot about sensitivity because creative people also tend to be very sensitive people. And I always wanted to help people. So when I was 12 years old, I already knew that I wanted to be a doctor, but I was too sensitive to handle life and death situations. I already knew that. And I was going to an orthodontist at the time, and I thought, hey, that's a great thing to do. I can make people look beautiful. And so I decided that I was going to be a dentist because no one dies as a dentist. The worst that could happen is the nerve in your tooth dies. That's about it. And so I was already writing comedy at that young age, but I was writing things for the amusement of my friends. And it used to bother me. I used to lay awake at night. First of all, it's a very strange thing for a 12-year-old kid to decide what he wants to do in his life and never change your mind. You know, I stuck with it my whole life. So a lot of times the universe gives you a message about what you're supposed to do. And I talk a lot about spirituality in my work, not religion, but spirituality, that we're all being guided in some way. And so I was guided to be drawn to these two things, to be a doctor and also to do comedy. And it used to bother me. I'm like, how can you do both? How can you be a doctor and also be in show business? I never heard of such a thing. And somehow I was able to combine those careers because I believe that you should try and do everything that interests you. You know, it's the same way I hate stereotypes. I hate when you can look at somebody and think that you know all about them just by looking at them. You know, I think that you should look the way you want and do the things that you love. Like I never looked like a doctor. No one ever thought that I was a doctor. Everyone thought I was in the music business, you know. When I was in practice, I had very long hair. It's a long story, but when I grew up in New York City, and I grew up in the Bronx, in a very middle-class neighborhood. Nobody was in show business, although my grandfather owned a nightclub, and it was a pretty famous nightclub. A lot of the comedians that I met when I broke into show business actually knew of my grandfather's nightclub. And it was a big hangout for gangsters and for entertainers. And so I got a taste of all that as a young kid because all of our family functions were held in this nightclub. And so show business always excited me. And in my junior year of dental school, I decided that I needed to meet Woody Allen because he was my comedic idol at the time. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen his stand-up comedy, but to me, it was amazing. When I was growing up, we had albums. There was no MP3s, you know. We had like regular albums that you'd play on a machine. And my friends and I would listen to comedy albums, and it would be like Woody Allen and Richard Pryor and people like that. And I always had a love for comedy. My dad had a great sense of humor, and he would take me to comedy films.
It's always about
As a young kid, you know, I'd see Laurel and Hardy and the Marx Brothers, and just I was immersed in comedy, and it was a great love of mine. So there were only three people that I ever wanted to meet in my life: Woody Allen, Salvador Dali, and the Beach Boys. And I managed to meet them all. And because when I was a kid, I had no fear in terms of meeting people. I felt that I should know everybody, and I felt that they should know me. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention, and it's tied in with what we're going to talk about tonight, about fear and also about sensitivity. When I was about 7 years old, I started to stutter, and I stuttered very badly. And my parents sent me for speech therapy, and nobody was able to help me. And I stuttered through my 20s and beyond. And I stuttered so badly that I couldn't even say my name. I could never say Gurian. Most stutterers have a hard time saying their names. I'm going to ask people to turn on their cameras if they'd be so kind to do that, because it's very hard to speak to just a black box. And so if that's not an imposition to anyone, for as many people as you can, to please turn on your camera. This is about an energy exchange, as you know from being a performer, and you need some feedback from people. So I want to see your nice faces, as opposed to just still pictures or a little black box, if you don't mind. So anyway, I set out to meet Woody Allen, and I managed to meet him and get a meeting with him. I was a kid, you know. I didn't have the confidence to go on my own. And I knew that in order to meet a big star, you have to show them that you're sane. There was no terrorism in those days, but still, big stars are not going to the theater hoping to meet young, aspiring talent. You know, that's not their goal. So I started sending Woody Allen cards. On my dental school cards, I would write a note on the back as if we were old friends. And I said, Woody, it's Jeffrey, and I'm coming to see the show, and I can't wait to see you. And every once in a while, when I could afford to come to New York from Philadelphia, because I was in school at Temple University, and so I was living in Philly, in North Philly, and I had no money. I was a poor student, so I could hardly come home to New York. But when I did, I'd go to the theater. He was in a show called Play It Again, Sam, with Tony Roberts, and because I didn't have the courage to go alone, I knew that if you wanted to prove to someone that you were sane, there's only two ways that you could do it. You could either wear a tie or bring a pretty girl with you. And I didn't have a tie. And I only knew one pretty girl, and she hated me because we had just broken up. But she knew that it was my dream to meet Woody Allen, so she agreed to come with me. And that night, I borrowed my dad's car, and I drove to Manhattan to the Broadway Theater. And I left my last card, and I said, Woody, I'm here, and I'll be back during intermission. And I didn't even know that you wait till the end of the show. You don't bother a star during intermission, you know? But I was a kid. I didn't know anything. So intermission comes, and I was very nervous. I was almost going to chicken out. And she said to me, Jeffrey, you can't chicken out because I agreed to come with you. You have to do this. So we go backstage, open the stage door, and the stage manager is not in his seat. There's nobody there. So I took her hand and I ran up these stairs, and it was the wrong way. I wound up on the roof, and I come back down, and the stage manager is there, and he says, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yes, Woody's expecting me." I had a lot of nerve in those days. I just said, "Woody's expecting me." And he said, "Go right in." Because again, there was no terrorism in those days. People were safe. It was a different world. So I go to Woody Allen's dressing room, and it's empty. He's not there. He's in Tony Roberts' dressing room with the whole cast of the show. And now I'm really in a panic. Talk about fear. I was so nervous. And she said, "Jeffrey, you have to do this. You can't back out." So I go up to the door of the dressing room, and I remember this like it was yesterday, even though it was decades ago. And I look in, and Woody Allen is sitting on the couch across the room, and the whole cast is in there. And I go up to the door, and I see him, and I go like this to him, like you would to a child. And he goes like, "Me?" Like that. And I'm like, "Yes, you." And he comes over, and he's actually holding my card. And he said to me, "You must be Jeff." And I was so excited that I lost it. I started saying ridiculous things to him, like, "Let's open up a day camp and throw winter clothes at people. And let's," because he had very strange humor. So I thought he would get this. And I said, "And let's walk low like we used to in Europe." And he looked at the girl I was with, and he goes, "This guy's an effing nut." Just like that. I realized I was being too intense, because sometimes when you get a chance to meet your idol, it's so exciting that you get carried away, right? So he said, so I explained to him, I said, "Look, I write comedy, and everyone says that everything I write is just like you. And I was hoping that you would look at my material." And he said to me, "Well, I'm in the middle of a show." He goes, "We're just on intermission." He said, "Do you think you could come back tomorrow night?" And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm much too busy." No, of course I didn't say that. I said, "Yes, of course I'll come back tomorrow night." So again, I begged the same girl to come with me. It was pouring rain. I borrow my dad's car again. We show up, and Woody sits with me for like an hour after the show, and he read all of my material. And I don't even think it was like in script form. It was like on little scraps of paper. But he was so kind. He sat in this little dressing room with me, and he read all of it. Now, my dream was that he was going to say to me, "Jeffrey, you're so funny. We have to make movies together." But that's not what happened. What he did say to me was, he goes, he said, "You're very funny, and your material is very visual, and you should think of making a film out of it," which I did some years later. It took me a while. Now, many years later, I got friendly with a man named Jack Rollins and Charlie Jaffe. They were Woody Allen's managers, and they used to manage Robin Williams and Billy Crystal at the time. They were the top comedy managers in the world. And Jack Rollins was very influential in sending me up to Saturday Night Live, and he really opened a lot of doors for me. He was a very big proponent of my work. But when I told him that story, he said that it was very unusual. Woody must have really seen something in you, because he never did that kind of stuff for people. And so that inspired me. When Saturday Night Live first started, I was doing films. I was doing films on the street, and I mentioned the stuttering thing. I was still stuttering when I should say this too. When I went to dental school, I had a very hard time in dental school, not just because of my ADHD, and a lot of creative people also suffer with ADD. ADHD is ADD in high definition, by the way, just so you know. And it's like, and it causes a lot of confusion, and confusion causes fear. And when you're in a fear state, it's very hard to make decisions. And I talk a lot about that because I was stuttering for no reason. I realized one day that I didn't stutter when I was alone. I only stuttered when I was trying to talk to somebody else. When I went to college, I made myself run for the president of the freshman class. Now, I went to a very big college, and it was fed in by 7 different high schools, and I only knew the kids from my own high school. And when I went to high school, I don't know if they still do it, but they voted on things like prettiest girl and handsomest guy, and it's basically a popularity contest. And I was voted as most talented, which must have meant I played the piano and I played the drums and I sang and I was in the senior show and stuff, but I was still stuttering. And I must have been popular, but I never felt it. I always felt like apart from. I didn't feel like I was like everyone else. I felt different. And my stuttering didn't really help me. So when I went to college, like I said, I ran for the president of the freshman class because I learned to confront my fears at a very early age. Despite the fact that I grew up in a very loving and supportive family, I grew up with a tremendous amount of fear. And I'm never quite sure where that comes from. And it's not important to ever decide why exactly you're experiencing something in your life. It is important to look at all the possibilities. And so I must have had some negative thoughts about myself. Um, and as we're growing up, very often people say mean things to us. Some of us have been bullied. Some of us have not been treated well by our parents. Sometimes the people that love you the most can give you negative messages. And for some reason, I must have had a feeling of low self-esteem and a lack of confidence, because it turned out that there was nothing wrong with me. Stuttering was a creation in my mind. As you can see, I no longer stutter. I've been given the grace to figure out how to stop stuttering. And as an avocation, I work with stutterers all over the world now, and I teach them how to change their thinking. And everything that I'm saying is all tied in with performers, with fear, with confusion, with sensitivity. It all goes together. Um, when I went to college, I told myself if I could win this election and be the president of the freshman class, I wouldn't have to stutter anymore because it would show me that people liked me. I must have had a feeling that people didn't like me, despite the fact that I was voted one of the senior celebrities. Something didn't give me a good feeling about myself. And so turned out that I won the election. I was the president of this huge college. I was the president of the freshman class, and I still stuttered. And it was a great lesson for me because it taught me that outside validation in life doesn't work. It doesn't matter how many people compliment you and tell you that you're wonderful and talented and fantastic. It matters what you think of yourself. And I decided then that I was going to work on myself. It took me years of very hard work to learn how to change my mind, to literally change my mind, which led to my 6th book, which is called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, a spiritual and humorous approach to achieving happiness. I've written 7 books, but my last 2 books are about happiness and about how to learn to change your thoughts, because a lot of us are holding thoughts that are not valid for us. And I was holding thoughts that needed me to create a disability for myself. And so when I realized one day that I didn't stutter when I was in a room by myself, I only stuttered when I was trying to talk to somebody else, it told me that you can't have a disability based on your location. You know, a man with a limp limps in every room of his house. He can't go into a room and close the door and walk perfectly. But if I could speak fine when I'm alone, then theoretically it means there's nothing wrong with me. I created it in my mind because I had thoughts that were not valid for me. And a lot of us do this. We do it with self-sabotage. We do it by believing people who say to us, you'll never make it, you're not talented enough, you're not this or you're not that, you're too tall, you're too small, you're too thin, you're too heavy. We get these negative thoughts about ourselves and they hold us back and they create fear and they create confusion and they lead to a lack of self-confidence and a lack of self-esteem. And they affect every decision that we make in our lives, because every time you're called upon to make a decision about what to do in your life, you think about what to do, right? Who else's thoughts can you use but your own? But if some of your thoughts are not working for you, if some of your thoughts are negative against yourself and they're not valid, then your decisions are not going to work out for you. And that's why we have these recurrent patterns in our lives about you get the same bad job all the time, or you're in the same bad relationship. You keep meeting people that don't treat you the way you deserve to be treated. And it happens as a pattern. And when you get these patterns in your life, the only thing that recurs is you. You're the only person that keeps showing up in each one of these relationships or in each one of these jobs. Everybody else is different, but it's you, but you're getting the same results. And there's this definition of insanity where they say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, always getting the same results. Now, some people look at that as optimism, and I'm one of those people, because in the entertainment business, trying to break in, you have to persevere. You're going to come up against a lot of obstacles. You're going to come up against a lot of people who don't appreciate what you do. They don't see the beauty in your work. They don't see the creativity, especially in the comedy world. Comedy is it's very subjective. What some people are hysterical at, other people are like, they're choking. They don't get it. They're humming, they're smiling. Smiling is not the objective when you're doing comedy. You'd like to see people actually laughing, So I may be jumping around a little bit, but all these things are connected. So I worked on myself for years to learn how to change a thought. And I had to do that when it came to fear also, because I don't know why, but so many things made me afraid. And there's two kinds of fear, basically. Any fear that you have, you can break it down into two categories: fear of losing what you have and fear of not getting what you want. Those are the two basic fears in life, especially when you're trying to break into the entertainment business, when you're trying to do something creative. We tend to think like we're mostly very sensitive people, and we feel things in a different way than most of the world. Artistic people experience life in a very different way than most people do. And when we feel things, we feel them very deeply. We feel them in their heart. I'm also very involved in energy healing. And I called what I do healing on a heart level. And I'm going to do a quick story about when I was in dental school. They treated me very badly. They singled me out. And I never knew exactly why until recently, when the dean of the dental school contacted me. He was not the dean when I went there, but he read about me on the internet. And his secretary sent me an email one day and said, the dean would like to come to New York and meet you and take you out to lunch. And I thought, wow, this is a really weird circumstance, because I was bullied and humiliated on a daily basis for 4 years. When I was accepted to a professional school, I expected to be welcomed by the doctors who were there as a person who was interested in joining their field. But instead, it turned into a 4-year fraternity hazing. I was picked on and bullied, not only by the students, by the faculty. And I was banned from school for 3 weeks. Now, when you're going to school to become a doctor, every day that you work on patients in the clinic is very important, because you have certain requirements that you have to fulfill. And by banning me from the clinic for 3 weeks, they were actually trying to make me drop out of school. And the reason is so stupid, because I grew a mustache and I had sideburns. And they said that that was not how a doctor should look in those days. They were very small-minded. And it may sound like a very simple thing, but to be made fun of and to be humiliated on a daily basis by doctors who you respected when you're only in your early 20s is really hard to handle. I was told that I was a disgrace to the profession. Meanwhile, I went on to have a very, very successful career, but they affected my self-esteem and my self-confidence so badly that it took me a long time to overcome that. And so when this dean contacted me, I was very reluctant. I thought he was just contacting me to ask for a donation, because in all the years since I graduated, I never had anything to do with the school. I never went back to Philadelphia. I tried to block it out of my mind because it was such a bad experience. But because I've learned to confront fear and uncomfortability, I decided that I would take the meeting and I would tell him about my bad experience. And I brought a screenplay that I wrote about my experience. And I brought pictures of my work, because I became a cosmetic specialist. And I used to make people look beautiful. And I worked on models and actors and all kinds of people. and I changed their whole smile. I was one of the innovators of cosmetic dentistry. And so I showed up at this meeting, and he brought another dean with him. It wasn't enough to meet one dean. I had to meet two deans. And they came to meet me, and they took me to this beautiful restaurant. And as I started to tell him my story, because I looked at it as an opportunity for closure, I said, the universe is giving me this unusual opportunity, and I'm going to tell this guy my story. And if he asks me for a donation, I'm going to tell him why I wouldn't give him one. And as I started to tell him what happened to me, he interrupted me and he said, I want you to know that they were racists and anti-Semites. And it really shook me. And I thanked him. I said, you know, I'm so happy that you said that I didn't have to say that, because that was always on my mind, that I was singled out. He said, they treated a lot of people that way. You were treated the worst, but they ruined the reputation of the school. And this dean, who had come in about 10 years ago, he said that he had read about me on the internet and that I was one of the most accomplished graduates. And he wanted to come and meet me to tell me that. And he wanted me to come to Philadelphia. He said he was going to send a car for me so he could give me a tour, so I could talk to the students and tell them what my experience was and how I used to be treated, because he said they changed the whole culture of the school. It's very diverse. When I went to school, there was one woman in my class, and it was an entirely white class. And it's no longer that way. And to show you how crazy life is, I just finished a series of 5 weekly lectures to the doctors about the kind of stuff I'm talking to you about thought, about how to change a thought, about how to treat people with kindness, about how important that is to make people feel comfortable when they come to your office, or in anything in life, that kindness is very, very important. So now that I got that story out of the way, when Saturday Night Live first started, I was making these films, and I was making these crazy films in the street. I never took a film class, but I bought camera equipment, and I went out to make, you know, I always liked silly comedy, the kind of comedy that didn't hurt anybody's feelings. Because from the time I was a kid, my goal has always been to put positive energy out to the universe and to make people laugh. So in my dental field, I made people beautiful. And in the other field, I made people laugh. And both of those things are putting positive energy out to the universe, right? What nicer thing can you do than make people look better and also make them laugh, right? So I was doing these little crazy films, like false news items, like several men were arrested for smearing cream cheese on the ankles of elderly women who wore their stockings rolled down like bagels. Have you ever seen the old women with the stockings around their ankles? It looked like bagels to me. So I got my dear grandmother to be in a film. She was so kind. She let me put cream cheese on her ankles and had her stockings rolled down. And she made believe she had a Jewish accent, which she didn't. She was born in this country, but she had a great sense of humor. Her husband was the one that owned the nightclub. And I understand that my grandparents got arrested during Prohibition for making illegal alcohol in the bathtub. So she was very cool. So she was in this film, and she said, you know, Jewish people, we have 2 kind of stockings, one for milk and one for meat. She goes, and this crazy man, he smeared cream cheese on my meat stockings and I can't get it off. And I zoomed in with my camera on the cream cheese on the ankles. And I decided I had to bring this up to Saturday Night Live. Now, in those days, I was driving what could only be described as a pimp mobile. In those days in New York, the pimps drove cars that were unbelievable to me. They drove custom-made Cadillac Eldorados. And I don't know if you ever saw the movie Superfly, but they would totally pimp out their cars way before MTV did Pimp My Ride, you know? And I was very impressed with that. So I went to a place in the Bronx to buy a car. It was my first car. And I bought a Mandarin Orange Eldorado that had been made for one of the Isley brothers. Now, this was actually confirmed to me years later. It was a boat. The car was so huge, and it was a 1975 Mandarin Eldorado, and I put a Rolls Royce grill on the front because that's what the pimps did. And I had big white wall tires and straps in the back. My hair was down my back, you know, and my wife would say to me, we're Jewish and we live in Scarsdale. Why am I driving an orange Cadillac? And I was like, obviously you don't get it. And wherever I went, people looked at me. Cops would follow me, you know, hookers would check out the car. Trust me, no white guy ever drove a car like that. It was just, it was me and that was it. So I decided that I needed to go to Saturday Night Live. It was a new show at the time, and I felt like I was doing films that belonged on the show. There were other things like The Masters of Disguise, which was a very strange concept too. It was two master criminals who disguised themselves as inanimate objects to commit their crimes. So it starts out as two men disguised as coats rob a hat store. They come in over the arms of two other men, and they say, just act natural like we're your coats and nobody will get hurt, right? And police draw composite drawings of the perpetrators, and it's two coats. And I did many crimes, and I would interview supposed victims who would give me their account of the crime. So Saturday Night Live was new. It was the hippest thing around. And I'm like, I got to get up there. So like I told you, the same way that I met Woody Allen and Salvador Dali and the Beach Boys, I had a lot of nerve in those days, because sometimes in show business, you have to have a lot of nerve. There's no rules to how to break into the business. If you're a singer, you got to figure out how to get your tape to somebody. If you're a musician, the same thing. If you're a comedian, it's like really hard. There's not a lot of places that are welcoming to new talent, you know? So I drove up to 30 Rock. Now, in those days, I don't know if any of you are familiar with New York City, but NBC is in a building called 30 Rock, 30 Rockefeller Plaza. And that's where Saturday Night Live comes from. And I drove up in front. These days, you can't get anywhere near the building, but in those days, you could drive right up to the front. I drive up in this orange Cadillac with a Rolls Royce grill. I have a CB radio in the shape of a telephone because there was no cell phones in those days. I make believe I'm on the phone. I drive up. I throw the doorman a couple of bucks, and I said, do me a favor, watch my car. Lorne Michaels is expecting me. Now, Lorne Michaels is the creator and producer of Saturday Night Live for like the last 45 years, right? He never heard of me. He didn't, you know, I just told, but if you drive up in a car like that and you make an impression, people tend to accept what you're saying. A lot of times it's about appearance, it's about your presentation, which is very important because when you're going to present yourself to somebody, you have to have like your look is your brand. So depending on what you're trying to do in the entertainment business, you have to develop a look that draws people to you, you know? So I pull up in this car, I say, watch my car, Lorne Michaels is expecting me. He's like, fine. And I leave the car in front. No one ever saw a car like that before. And I go in and I sneak past security and I get in the elevator. Again, these days, you could never do that. You couldn't sneak past security. They'd shoot at you. I get in the elevator and I go up to Saturday Night Live and I get out, and a man named Alan Zweibel, who has become an award-winning writer, producer, director. They were all kids at the time. It was all young kids. Chevy Chase and John Lovitz and John Belushi, I meant to say. Alan Zweibel is playing handball on the wall in the hallway of Saturday Night Live. And I introduce myself and I tell him about my films, and he looks, he says, come inside. And they watch my films and he goes, these are crazy. I never saw anything like this. This is great. And he does something that was really amazing. Instead of giving me his manager's number, he called him for me to introduce me. And he says, I would like you to meet this kid, Jeffrey Gurian. He's really funny. Now, it was such a kind thing to do because it's very hard to get people to help you in this business, you know? And sometimes if you're lucky, they'll give you a number and you have to call yourself. But he actually called for me. And this particular manager, his name was David Jonas. And he died just a few years ago at 100 years old. And he was managing Freddie Prinze at the time, a very famous comedian. You probably know Freddie Prinze Jr., but this was Freddie Prinze Sr., who was starring in a sitcom called Chico and the Man. And this guy, David Jonas, was the one who got him that gig. And he became my first manager. And he tried to talk me out of it. He goes, "What are you, crazy? You're a doctor. What do you need this for?" And I'm like, because I'm a comedy person too. I couldn't get a job as a waiter, so I went to dental school. You know, I used to tell people that it was a very nasty rumor, because when I was writing for Joan Rivers, she had no idea about my other career. So I used to tell people when I would be interviewed on TV or the radio, and I'd say, "No, the whole dentist thing is it's a nasty rumor." And do you know when it started? The day I graduated from dental school. And it never stopped. It never let up. But well, I'm writing for Joan Rivers. This is another little story. She had seen me from the Friars Club. Are you guys familiar with the Friars Club? Is a very famous show business organization that started the roasts. If you remember the Comedy Central roasts, and years before the Dean Martin roast, all those came out of the Friars Club. The Friars Club is a very exclusive show business organization based in Manhattan on 55th Street. And it's in a gorgeous 5-story building that was given to them by a man named Milton Berle. I don't know if any of you knew the name Milton Berle, Mr. Television. People in this country actually bought televisions to watch his show. That's how popular he was and how famous he was. And he was my sponsor in the Friars Club. That's what an honor that was to me, that I got to meet him and write jokes for him. So I kind of lost my train of thought because I went off on a tangent, but I was telling you about Saturday Night Live. So, and I was telling you about David Jonas. So he got me started writing jokes for comedians. And it took me about a year to literally learn how to craft a joke. Writing a joke is a very difficult thing. I was thinking in terms of sketches. I'm thinking cream cheese on the ankles. That's not the kind of thing that you could do on stage. You know, you have to gear yourself in the entertainment business. You have to find a focus. You have to find what you're good at and try to focus your energy on that one particular thing. So if I wanted to write jokes for comedians, I couldn't be coming up with sketches because they can't use them on stage. So he worked with me for about a year, despite the fact that he tried to talk me out of it. He saw how committed I was. And I was telling you the story about Joan Rivers. So I was writing jokes for the Friars Club. Now, the Friars roasts were notoriously private because they were notoriously filthy. And God, I guess, blessed me with a dirty mind, and I was able to write filthy jokes for the Friars roast. And I wrote for some of the biggest stars. When Chevy Chase was roasted, I wrote Bruce Willis's roast. I wrote that with him. Jerry Lewis, who you probably have heard of from the golden age of comedy, he died at about 93 years old a couple of years ago. I wrote his speech and I wrote jokes for his roast. I got to work with some of the very biggest stars in the business, but I didn't tell people I was also a dentist because, as I told Joan Rivers when she asked me why I never told her, no one hires you in show business because you're a dentist. They hire you in spite of the fact. You know what I mean? It's not exactly a prerequisite to be in show business to go to dental school first. So I was in my office working, and my nurse had strict instructions: never interrupt me unless it's for show business. So she would come into the room and she'd say, Dr. Rivers is on the phone. Dr. Lewis is calling, you know. The only one no one believed was Dr. Dangerfield. No one ever believed that there could be a Dr. Dangerfield. And so, oh, I'm sorry. Somebody has to mute themselves. So unless there's heckling, I never heard of Zoom heckling before. that would be something really new. So Joan Rivers calls me one morning and she says to me, "What do you do during the day?" And I was like, "Well, I work." And she said, "Well, obviously you work, but what is it that you do?" Now, I have been doing a lot of TV interviews. A lot of people found it interesting. Like I had a cover story in the New York Times, came out about a dentist who was writing comedy for very big stars. And so I got a lot of press out of it. And her assistant had seen me on TV. So Joan knew, but she wasn't saying. So she goes, how come you never told me? And that's when I said to her, because no one hires you in show business because you're a dentist. They hire you in spite of it. And she loved it. She thought it was great. But I was always very reluctant to say, because I never wanted anyone to think that I didn't take comedy seriously. You know, I didn't want to look like it was like a, you know, there used to be a show, the Ed Sullivan Show, and he'd have like knife throwers and plate spinners and all kinds of weird variety acts. And I'm like, I never wanted to look like a novelty. I wanted to be taken seriously as a comedy writer, not a dentist who writes comedy, but a comedy writer who sometimes did dentistry also. You know what I mean? When I'm in show business, comedy is what is my focus. And that's how I wanted people to perceive me. And that's why I felt that I had to work with only big stars. Because if I was writing for comedians you never heard of, it wouldn't mean anything. Nobody would really take me seriously. But if I could tell you that I'm writing for some of the biggest stars in show business, hey, that's a different thing. When Jerry Lewis was working with Sammy Davis Jr., they had been friends for 40 years and they had never performed together. And they were going to perform for the first time in Las Vegas. And they asked me to write material for them. And that was one of my biggest honors. I got a picture with me and Sammy Davis Jr. My walls are covered. Like, one of my 7 books is a book I did with Chris Rock. And it was about the history of the comic strip. The comic strip is a legendary comedy club in New York City where Eddie Murphy started and Jerry Seinfeld started. It's the club where Eddie Murphy discovered Chris Rock in 1985. And I don't know if you know that story, but at the time, Eddie was the biggest star in the world. He was the Elvis of comedy. He was wearing leather suits. Nobody ever did that before. And he was managed by my partner, Richie Tinkin, who owns the comic strip. And as a matter of fact, Richie was in a couple of Eddie's specials that they televised. He's an older white-haired guy, but he and Eddie were like son and father. They were very, very close. And so I wound up doing the book on the history of the comic strip. So when Eddie was the biggest star in the world, he dropped by the club one night and he said, are there any black comics that I can see that you could put up? And interestingly enough, in those days, there were hardly any black comics. There was a handful of black comics, not like today at all, you know? And by the way, I was Patrice O'Neill's co-host, if any of you knew Patrice, the great Patrice O'Neill, on a show called The Black Phillip Show. We did some amazing stuff together. And I even have a fan in Japan. I went to Japan last year and a guy came over to me and he goes, I can't believe I'm meeting you. I was a big fan of you and Patrice on the Black Phillip Show. I keep going off on tangents because one thing leads me to think of something else. So there were hardly any black comics and Chris Rock was like 19 years old and he was setting up chairs in the club and cleaning up in exchange for stage time. Because when you want to catch a break in the business, you do whatever you can to catch a break. And Chris used to tell me he would sleep in the club hoping that one comic wouldn't show up for his set so that they'd put him on. So Chris had no experience. He was doing late night. He was performing at 2 a.m. for 6 drunks. And this was a Friday night and the place was packed. But Richie, the owner, didn't want Eddie Murphy to leave because everyone was so excited when Eddie would show up because he was literally the biggest star in the world. So they decided to put Chris Rock up on stage and give him a chance. And Chris, he told me the story for my book. He told me himself that he was so nervous to perform in front of his idol, but he went up on stage and he killed, he totally killed. And it was such an amazing thing. Talk about confronting fear. He said he heard Eddie laughing because, you know, Eddie's got that crazy laugh of his. And he heard him laughing while he was on stage. And when he came off stage, Eddie was waiting for him. And they sat in the corner together. Eddie's bodyguard kept people away. And Eddie gave Chris his phone number. And a couple of days later, Chris was walking in the street. Word got out through the comedy community that Eddie was there and he liked what Chris did. And there was a man named Louis Ferranda, who these days runs Caroline's Comedy Club for many years. But in those days, he was a bartender at a comedy club called Catch a Rising Star. Because when you first break into the business, you take any job you can get just to be around people, just to absorb it. Like if you're an extra, never think that your role is not important. Just being on a set of someplace is important. There's no such thing as a small job, as a small role. Don't let your ego get in the way, no matter what you take, because you never know who you're going to meet on that day that you're there. So all those things are very important. So Chris is walking through the street and he runs into Louis Ferranda, and Louis says to him, "Hey, I heard Eddie Murphy liked you." He goes, "Yeah, he gave me his phone number." And he's like, "Well, did you call him?" And he's like, "No, I'm too scared to call him." And he's like, "Schmuck, if Eddie Murphy gives you his number, call the guy." So he called him, and Eddie invited him to come to the movies with him, with his mother, because his mother traveled with him a lot, and his whole entourage. And Chris said it was so long ago that Spike Lee was out in the streets selling T-shirts. That's how long ago it was. And after he went to the movies with him, Eddie invited him to come to LA. Eddie was doing reshoots for a movie called Golden Child. And so I said, "Chris, did you go?" He's like, he had never been on a plane before. He said, "I grew up in Bed-Stuy. There were 7 brothers and 1 sister. We were so poor." He goes, "I never even had a shrimp cocktail. My father used to buy 1 shrimp and cut it into 7 pieces." He said he borrowed clothes from his brothers and he went to LA. They put him in this beautiful hotel. And Richie said he noticed that Chris wasn't eating. So he said, "What's up with that?" He's like, "Well, I can't afford $10 for a hamburger." And he said, "Hey, it's on Paramount. Eddie's paying for everything. Don't worry about it." And so when that shoot was over, Richie told me the story. He said he'll never forget it. He took Chris to the airport, and as Chris was leaving, Chris said to him, "Richie, don't forget about me." Because before this, Chris only was working at 2 a.m. And Richie said, "Chris, don't worry about it. From now on, you'll get good spots." And that's what allowed Chris Rock to become a big star. And he never forgot it. And so to this day, so he wrote the foreword to my book, one of those books. It's called Laughing Legends. They actually did 2 versions of the book. And you'll see me in there with Chris and Kevin Hart, because I wound up producing Kevin Hart for a benefit for Haiti. And I wound up working with some of the very biggest stars in the comedy business. That guy, Alan Zweibel, I'm in touch with him today. I just spoke to him yesterday, as a matter of fact. He just came out with another book too that was a big hit.
Tell him we said hi, Jeffrey, the next time you talk to him. He actually did a couple calls for us as well.
Oh, okay. So you're
love Alan,
familiar with him. Yeah. So Alan is great. And I always thank him for that, because what he did, he went out of his way to help me. And I don't think he could have any idea at that time what it would mean to somebody. But by making that phone call for me, that opened the door for me to be able to meet somebody that was able to give me entree into the business. And since that time, I became a regular on Sirius XM radio. I was on for a couple of years on the Bennington show. And when they did that documentary about me, Ron Bennington said that I'm the only person he knows that knew the greats from the golden years of comedy, and is also friends with all the young comics from today, because I perform in every comedy club in New York and in Los Angeles. And, I'm friends with Nick Kroll and John Mulaney, who had a Kroll show on Comedy Central. I'm the first guy to be pranked with too much tuna, which sounds very silly. But if you look on my website, which is comedymatterstv.com, you'll see the sketch from Comedy Central. It's got over 1 million views. They think it's funny to prank somebody with a very big tuna fish sandwich. I'm the first. They wound up doing it on Broadway. They had a hit Broadway show called Oh Hello. And they had me open the Broadway show for them. Talk about that. We were on the red carpet on opening night. So you never know what happens in the entertainment business just by showing up, by persevering, by meeting people. You'll get knocked down, but if you believe in yourself, you'll make it. You know, if you really believe that you have talent in something, then you never ever give up. You always persevere. It doesn't matter what people tell you. You have to be realistic, you know? If you're a comedian and no one has ever laughed at anything you did, then maybe it's a wrong choice for you, you know? But if you feel that you have creativity, then you must pursue it and you must take it as far as you can. And you can never give up because you'll never feel comfortable. You know, sometimes we wind up in relationships with people who don't honor the fact that we want to break in as an artist into something, and they make you suppress it. And if you allow them to do that, you will resent them at some point because you can only suppress it for so long. Ray Romano, who I'm sure you know, a very famous star, started out in the comedy world under the name Jamie Roberts. And in New York in the early days, if you wanted to perform in comedy, they had lotteries in each club. You had to put your name in a hat. And if they picked your name, you could go up on stage and perform. So the very first comedy club in the world was called the Improv in New York City. And Ray wanted to go perform. And he wanted to double his chances. So he wanted to bring a friend with him to also put their name in the hat. But he couldn't find a guy. He could only find a girl. And he goes, well, you can't put a girl's name in because if they pick that name, I can't go up as a girl's name. So she picked the name Jamie Roberts, which could be an androgynous name. So of course they picked that name out of the hat, and Ray Romano has to go up on stage as Jamie Roberts. And because there's such a thing as beginner's luck, he did really well that night. He got a lot of laughs, and they kept calling him back, and he had to keep performing as Jamie Roberts because he couldn't tell the owner of the club that he lied about his name. So for the first 3 months of his career, he was Jamie Roberts. Then one night he said he bombed horribly, which happens, right? He just had the worst set. He bombed so bad that he left comedy. He didn't perform again for 2 years, and he went back to he was delivering futons. That was the business. His best friend owned a futon company, and he was delivering futon. He actually delivered a futon to Larry David from Curb Your Enthusiasm, who you know has the personality of never being happy, and of course he was not happy with the futon, and he made him return it. And this was way before. But so Ray Romano did not perform for 2 years. He was delivering futons for 2 years, and then it was driving him crazy, and he couldn't take it anymore, and he had to go back to comedy. But this time he came back to the comic strip where I wrote the book, and he came back as Ray Romano. No more Jamie Roberts. And that's what made his career. He met his manager there, a man named Rory Rosegarten, who's his manager to this day. 40 years later, they're still together out of a very chance meeting. Let's put it that way. That's why you have to show up for things, because you never know who you're going to meet that day. And never overlook an opportunity. I know that nobody crosses my path by accident. I've been working many years to develop my levels of consciousness. And the higher you develop your level of consciousness, the more you're going to meet people that you're supposed to know. The universe puts people in your path that you're supposed to know. And never overlook that as an opportunity. When people contact me, I get random contacts sometimes by email. And I'm going to give everybody my email because I welcome that if people have a question or they want to talk about something. So it's Jeffrey@jeffreygurian.com. And Gurian, Jeffrey, Jeffrey, Jeffrey@jeffreygurian.com. And, you know, I didn't talk that much about fear, but I want to touch on that because I've had to confront fear all my life for whatever reason. I confronted it in order to stop stuttering. I confronted it to have the courage to get on stage to perform comedy, because if you start when you're in your 20s and nobody knows you, you have the freedom to bomb. And that's how you get better. You go up on stage and you don't do that well, but you keep coming back. And you might feel embarrassment, but embarrassment is just a thought. You know, if I do bad on stage, I might feel embarrassed, but you won't feel embarrassed. no one ever had to lose sleep or quit their job because of something that I did on stage. Luckily, I've never had that many bad sets, if any at all. But I didn't start performing until many years after I was known as a comedy writer. And I had a lot of fear about going on stage because, as I said, if you start in your 20s and nobody knows you, you have the freedom to not do well. And you keep going back and then you get better and better. But by the time I wanted to start performing comedy, too many people knew me. I had already worked for a lot of big stars, and I felt like a lot of pressure on me to do well. It's like being the younger brother of a big star or something like that. There's a lot of pressure, which is why I give Jordan Rock so much credit. Jordan Rock is Chris Rock's baby brother, who was in Judd Apatow's show Love on Netflix, and he's killing it. He's doing great stuff. And he and I, we used to host late night shows at the comic strip. We were the only two hosts that they ever had for late night. I would do Sunday and Monday, and he would do Tuesday and Wednesday. And Pete Davidson used to come in with him. You know, Pete from Saturday Night Live was a good friend of ours. And I used to give them spots on the show. Pete was just a teenager at the time, and he would come in with Jordan. And, you know, I don't have to tell you about Pete's career. He just blew up, you know. And I don't know if you saw his recent film, The King of Staten Island, but there's a lot of people in there. They're all friends. Bill Burr is a dear friend of mine, and Ricky Velez, who's one of Pete's really good friends. He's in his group. They're all friends, and I get to see all those guys because I got the courage to go up on stage. I also write about the comedy scene. The last 20 years, I've been a comedy journalist. So I do everything in front of the camera and also behind the camera. You know, I think it's important to know. I went to acting school because I direct things, and I wanted to get the experience of what an actor has to go through. And I think it's important to try to experience everything you can in the entertainment business to see what you like. So I took Meisner technique. I did a summer class for about 3 months, and I've taken a lot more classes than that. But I try and immerse myself in everything in the entertainment business. I think it's really important to be well-rounded in this business and not to only do one thing. So as a writer, I feel like I can write anything. I can write comedy, and I can write sketches, and I can write poems. Not that there's any call for poems, but you know, I'm being facetious, but I think it's good to try and understand what other people go through. As a director, it's important to really to feel what actors feel. You know, again, we're all so sensitive. So I talk about that a lot. My confronting fear has allowed me to overcome a lot of things. I had COVID double pneumonia. I was in the hospital last March. I got it as soon as it came out because I like to be the first at everything, you know. So I didn't expect to be in the hospital, but it was a nightmare. It was an absolute. It was when New York was being overrun. We were the center of the pandemic, the epicenter of the pandemic. And by the time I had to call an ambulance, I was sick already for 2 weeks. I couldn't take it anymore. And I had to call an ambulance. And it was really scary to call an ambulance at that time because people were saying, try to stay away from the emergency room because there's so many germs around. You don't know who's sick and who isn't. But I was so sick that and I also went through a heart attack a few years ago. I had a heart attack out of nowhere. I was never sick a day in my life, but positive thinking helped me get through. I was back on stage 5 days after I had a serious heart attack. And the owner of the comedy club said to me, he goes, "What are you, crazy? You just had a heart attack." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's hard to get a spot here. I don't want to lose my spot, you know?" And I had a really good set that night too. I told the audience about my heart attack and they thought it was very funny because there was a lot of humor in what actually happened, despite the fact that I had what they call a widowmaker heart attack, which is about the most serious kind that you can have. They said I was like 95% blocked. And I was at 3 parties the night before. I was with the people from Sirius XM. We were dancing, hanging out. I had no problems. In the middle of the day, that's how crazy life is, that you can get that sick out of nowhere. And I had to maintain a positive frame of mind. which I also want to stress is very important. When I had COVID and they put me, my first 2 days I was in isolation. And on my third day, they wheeled me into a room with 3 other very sick men, all with the virus, because there was no more room to put me in a private room. And I don't know if they were kidding me, but they told me that the man in the bed next to me was from Wuhan, China. What are the odds, right? Seriously, it was a very elderly man who didn't speak English, and he was coughing and choking into the air with no mask. And I'm laying right next to the guy. And I told the nurse, I expressed my concern to the nurse, and she said to me, don't worry, there's a thin curtain between you. Meanwhile, she's wearing like a hazmat suit and a shield and gloves and a mask, but I have a thin curtain. And I'm like, yeah, I should have realized anytime you want to protect yourself from a deadly virus, everyone knows you hang a thin curtain there, you know? So I had to work very hard to maintain a positive state of mind, because when you're in a negative state of mind, your immune system doesn't function well and your vibration level goes down. We all vibrate at a certain frequency. When you're happy, you know, if you've ever been in a room and one person is angry, it's a crowded room, but one person is angry or they're arguing, you could feel it. We're all very sensitive. You can actually feel it. And it's the same when one person is very happy, you can feel that also. So when I'm laying there in the hospital and there's like people really sick all around me and people are dying, one of my roommates had to be rushed to a ventilator because his oxygen dropped from 93 to 80 within seconds. It's very hard to stay positive. And I had to do what I write about. It's not enough to just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And I had to tell myself, I had nurses that came to my bed and took my hand and said to me, don't worry, you're going to be okay. You're going to make it. And I can't tell you how important that is when we're kind to each other. That's a very important thing, to be kind to each other. You know, in this business, we need all the friends we can get because there's a lot of obstacles that are going to be put in your way. At the last minute, things are going to happen that are going to be really weird, and you have to stay centered, you know? So I confront my fear and my uncomfortability on a daily basis, and I take it to extremes. Anything that makes me uncomfortable, I have to do it. And I'm not talking about dangerous stuff like skydiving. I don't want to do that. But last October, I made myself go to Japan all by myself. And it was the scariest thing I ever did. And for some reason, I always wanted to go to Japan. It was always a dream of mine. I should have realized I have very weird dreams, but I made myself go a 14-hour flight. Now I'm nervous to travel because my ADD always gets me lost. I'm lost all the time. And that creates a lot of fear, a lot of confusion. But I refuse, you know, fear is a bully. Fear wants you to stay at home in bed, under the covers, with the cover over your head. It tells you that you'll never be successful. It tells you that you're not talented enough. It tells you that other people could do it and you can't. And that's a subconscious part of your mind. That's our enemy. And fear is a bully, and you have to stand up to it the same way you stand up to a bully in the street, and they usually back down. And you have to say F you to the fear, because the fear will try and stop you every time. So I've had to battle fear all through my life, and I've accomplished many, many things. And I didn't do it easily, but I did it, and that's what counts. So I went to Japan for 2 weeks. I was lost every single day. I conquered the Japanese subway system. I took level 1 Japanese 3 times, so I could at least feel like I learned some Japanese. And 2 years in a row, a friend of mine was supposed to go with me, and every time he backed out. And he's married to a Japanese woman, and she even said, just go with Jeffrey. And 2 times he had to back out. And then I said, you know what? I'm going myself. I'm not letting other people stand in my way. I can't let people dictate what my life is going to be. I can't wait for other people to do something so I can do it too. So I went and I made it, you know. I performed in 2 shows over there, and that's where I found out I had a fan in Japan. And I went to spiritual meetings, and I took the subway every day. I went all over. I went from Tokyo to Kyoto to Osaka. I went on bullet trains. I found people the people were so kind. They helped me. 5 different people left where they were going to physically take me where I was going, strangers. That'll never happen in New York. You're lucky if people answer you in New York, if you ask them for directions. But literally, they left the 2 girls got off the subway. They were going to a different city, and they took me to my hotel to make sure that I wouldn't get lost. So I had amazing experiences in my life because I allowed myself to confront my fears. Starting from when I was a kid and I was afraid of the dark as a little kid, and I made myself go in the dark to show myself that there was nothing there to be afraid of. And that didn't take away my fear. So, some genius once said that courage is not a lack of fear. Courage is having the fear and doing it anyway. And that's how I've had to approach my life. So when you have an audition, when you're up for a part in something, there's going to be a lot of fear involved. We have these existential fears. Am I really good enough to do what I want to do? Am I following the right path? We question ourselves because we're sensitive and we're creative and we feel these things. And sometimes we doubt ourselves because of negative thoughts that other people have given us. And so I want to open this up to questions, but I want to read you guys one thing before I stop, because this is a statement. I don't do a lot of reading to people, but this is a short statement and it's so meaningful to me. I actually carry it with me every single day. And I want you to listen to it carefully because it pertains to everything that you're all going to go through. And it's called About Fear. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that others won't feel insecure around you. We were born to manifest the glory within us. It's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And I hope that means something to you. It's taken from a book by Marianne Williamson, who wrote a book called A Return to Love. And what it's basically saying that it's okay to be successful. It's okay to be a superstar. When I was a kid in school, I used to make believe that I didn't know the answer when the teacher called on me because I didn't want the other kids to feel bad that I thought I was smart. Not that I was smart, but that I thought I was smart. I held myself back. I wanted other people to feel better about themselves. And I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but it's okay to be a superstar and it's okay to be all you can be, because it doesn't make other people feel bad. It makes you an inspiration to them. You inspire them because you tell them that if you can do it, they can do it too. And I use my stuttering as an example because when I work with stutterers, many of them are hopeless and they've tried many things and nothing has ever helped them. And if any of you know anybody who stutters, please send them to my website. I have a special website for that. It's called StopStutteringNowGurian.com. And because in this country alone, there are 3 million people, more than 3 million people who stutter, but it also affects people in their family and people that they know. And it's something that's very dear to me. So it's StopStutteringNowGurian.com. And I devote myself to teaching people that it's okay to be a superstar. You can be all you can be, and then you inspire people. And I use myself as an example. If I conquered stuttering, they can conquer it. If I overcame fear and overcame obstacles in my life, you can do the same thing if you do the same things that I did, which is why I wrote that new book. When I got out of the hospital from COVID, I was home. I've been home for months, like everybody else, but like 10 months already, right? And I didn't want to waste my time. So I wrote 2 books, but I only published one of them so far because you can't publish 2 books at the same time. And it's called Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way. And it came out as a #1 release on Amazon in medicine and psychology, group therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, which was the most important to me because cognitive stuff means thoughts, how to change your thinking. positive thinking is so critically important. And it was a #1 release in adult children of alcoholics, because a lot of very creative people and very sensitive people, we turn to alcohol and drugs very often because we can't help. Things are overwhelming to us and we can't handle it. And so we need something to try to take the edge off. And so that's why a lot of very creative people wind up turning to substances. And I do a lot of work with 12-step people and people who are addicted to different substances. And it's all about learning to change the way you think, opening your mind to different thoughts. And so I know I said a lot of crazy stuff. I was off on a lot of tangents. I hope things that I said helped somebody, and I'm willing to stay around for questions. I'm sure that people have questions or things that they want to talk about. I'm gonna open the chat box. I see there's 99 plus things. So I'm very open to answering stuff. So let me see.
If it's okay, I wrote down a couple questions from a while back. If
Oh,
it's
great.
cool.
Yeah,
And then
okay.
we have
Wow, there's
people-
some huge list of things. Okay, so please, yes, please ask me questions. And
So the first question is from Deborah Roseborough. She asked, what do you say to yourself when those negative thoughts are coming in? How do you stop them?
okay, it depends on the situation, but there's a very good tip that I'm going to teach you. A lot of us have OCD, and there's nothing to be ashamed about. It means like when you get a thought, you can't let go of it, that you keep thinking about it, you obsess about it. And it's a very common thing, and some people take medication for it. When I was a kid, if I accidentally brushed the left side of my arm against the wall, I'd have to brush the right side to feel even. That's a form of OCD. Some people have it like to an extreme extent. But when I get a thought, I can't get rid of it. It's very hard for me. I can hear a song and it'll play in my head for days and I can't get it out of there. So one great technique is when you get a thought that you don't want to have, simply say the word cancel. Or there are a couple of ways that I teach people. You can say cancel, or I choose not to think about that at this time, which gives you the freedom to bring back that thought at another time. If you choose to, you have to give your mind freedom. Your mind actually, it's a very strange concept to understand that your mind works against you. Your subconscious mind does not know the difference between fact and fiction. It believes whatever you tell it. If you tell your subconscious mind that you're a loser, that's what you're going to manifest in your life. And if you tell your subconscious mind that you're a winner, that you're meant to make it, that's what you'll draw into your life. You must stay positive. Positive thinking is not just a cliche. It's very, very important to train your mind that way. So again, when you have an uncomfortable thought, a negative thought, you have to tell yourself it's not valid, and you can just use the simple word cancel. Cancel the thought. I just say one thing, cancel. And I physically take my mind and move it to another thing. Because if I don't do that, I will dwell on that thought. And the other thing, as I said, is to say, I choose not to think about that now. And it works, believe me. You can train your mind. Your mind works for you. You don't work for your mind. Yeah. You're the employer. You tell your mind what to do. It feels like it's the opposite, like we're victims of our mind. But you can actually control your mind. And it takes work. Like I said, it took me years. I use stuttering as an example because it's one of the hardest things I ever did, was to cure myself. But as you see, I no longer stutter. And I called the Stuttering Institute to be helpful. And they had the nerve to say that no one's ever been cured of stuttering. So there are people out there who do not understand the power of the mind. Yeah. Power of the mind is incredibly strong. Please go ahead with your question.
Next question that she asked.
Really quick. Wait, hi, Jeffrey Gurian.
Who's that?
It's Alicia.
Hi, Alicia. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I just wanted to get quick and tell you I love you.
I don't see you on my screen. I got to go to gallery.
I'm here. And I brought the baby so he could see you.
Oh, so beautiful. Oh, amazing. That's so great. And you look fantastic.
Thank you, sir. We've been friends for like 12 years, guys. We have been friends forever. And he was my very first guest on our CBS radio show. So I just wanted to get on and say hello. And I love you.
That was fantastic. And I was telling them how we used to have such huge events in New York at Caroline's, and it was always the best. And then I love doing stuff with you because I give you so much credit for having an organization like this, for helping all these people
Thank you.
to further their careers. It's a very special thing that you do.
Thank you. And guys, you have no idea how great it is living in New York City with Jeffrey Gurian, going out to dinner, going to comedy clubs. We've seen so many amazing comedians over the years. And every time Jeffrey Gurian walks in, they're like this. So I thank you for always getting me into comedy clubs.
Anytime, absolutely.
anytime.
When all this insanity is over, we'll have to do it again.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be in New York soon.
Beautiful.
All right.
Beautiful.
Love you. Hope you guys are having fun. Bye.
Thank you. So, Deneen, please continue with the questions.
Deborah's next question is, how did you balance dentistry and comedy? Like, how did you balance two different careers? And I just want to say something too. I think it's really ironic that one of the highest fears that people have is of the dentist, and you're talking about overcoming fear. Because when I used to work, in the office, people would be, hi, they'd be petrified. I'm like, calm down, don't worry, we got this.
You know what? That was a specialty of mine. Not only was I a cosmetic dentist, but I always geared my practice towards painless work. So children would come to me, people would come to me and ask if I would give them the injections before they went to another dentist or a surgeon, because it's possible to give painless injections. A patient once said to me, and I'll never forget it, he said, I think you'd rather hurt yourself than hurt me. And I said, yeah, that's really true. I devoted myself to doing comfortable work so that nobody would be afraid to come to me. And I worked with little children, and I would give them injections and they wouldn't even feel it. It's possible. And I used to hate it. I once went to a dental lecture where the dentist giving the lecture had the nerve to say, never use topical anesthetic on children. It's good for them to feel a little pain. And I got so angry, and I stood up and I said, hey, when you go to the dentist, do you want to feel a little pain? You know, what kind of a stupid thing is that to tell people?
And
so
we'd like to thank him for scaring a whole generation of people.
Exactly. That's why when people are afraid of a
God.
dentist, it's usually not something that happened as an adult. It's usually something that happened as a child.
Yeah.
And you keep those fears with you. That's what, you know what? Not to just plug my book, but that's what my first book was about, healing your heart by changing your mind. It's about the heart wounds that we accumulate from the time we're children. Every time somebody says something to you that hurts your feelings, or breaks a promise to you, or breaks up with you in a relationship, or lets you down in some way, it stays lodged inside of us in our heart chakra. And you should all know about chakras. They're energy centers. It's a Sanskrit word. It means wheels of energy, but they're very powerful. And there are 7 of them in the body. Some people say 12, but I work with 7, you know, and each chakra controls a different part of your life and a different part of your body. And the heart chakra is the color green, and it has to do with feeling. And when we're hurt, when someone hurts us, we absorb it into our heart chakras. When you're a little kid, they teach you this stupid saying, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never harm you, which is the furthest from the truth. It's so stupid, because all the bruises you got as a kid healed up a long time ago. But every single one of us can remember something that someone said that hurt our feelings and that insulted us in some way. And we remember it like it happened yesterday. It doesn't go, it gives me chills even to talk about it. And we have to overcome those things, because a lot of those thoughts, those hurt things, were given to us by people who didn't have our best interests at heart. And like I said, it could have come from bullying as a child. It could even come from our parents, because a lot of parents, maybe they did the best they could, but not everybody did a great job, you know? And some parents told their kids, you'll never amount to anything, you're a waste, you're a loser. And somewhere along the line, we get negative messages, and we keep them, and they affect us, and they affect, as I said, our self-esteem, our self-confidence, and they affect our decisions. So this was the first book I wrote, and it became a bestseller. And they're both on Amazon. If you want to check it out, there's an ebook, a paperback, and an audiobook. You can even get it for free if you're on Kindle. But it's all about what I'm talking to you about. It's learning to release those things so that we can become the people that we were meant to be. You know, there's a spiritual thing that says that we choose our parents before we were born. I don't know anybody that had a very easy childhood. We're all going through stuff, you know, and it's like, and it's not about blame. It's not about, we don't blame our parents, but it's about telling the truth. If this is what happened to you, then this is what happened to you. And, you know, our thoughts are not based on our experience. They're based on our interpretation of our experience. So it's the reason why you could have two siblings that are completely different people. And if you ask them about their childhood, you'd think they had different parents, because how things affected one of them is not necessarily how things affected the other one. And so because we're all very sensitive as performers, it's important that we honor that and that we don't allow people into our lives who don't understand our level of sensitivity. So if you're in a relationship with someone who doesn't get you, then it's not going to be successful, because you're never going to be able to change them, because they're going to constantly be hurting your feelings because they don't get the level of sensitivity that you function on. And that makes it hard sometimes to connect to other people. But there's a great saying that I use in my book, and it's, the higher up the mountain you go, the lonelier it gets, but the view is magnificent. So what that means is that the higher you raise your level of consciousness, sometimes the harder it is to meet people who are on that same level as you. And it can make you feel very lonely at times, you know, but the people that you do meet who are on that level, you'll form a stronger bond with them, because you'll understand that you're like-minded people, you know, and we have to learn to censor our lives. That's one of the important things. Not allow people into your life that drain you. Negativity is a real thing. And when you're sensitive, very often you tend to draw people into your life who need your energy. And they're like energy vampires. And they call you when they're sad, or they call you when they're going through something, and they expect you to help them through it. And by the time you're finished helping them, you're drained, and now they feel okay. And then you don't hear from them again until they need you, right? And so you have to learn not to be mean, but to censor your life so that you can protect your energy. You must always protect your heart energy. When I do healing, I have to do a little thing so I don't internalize other people's pain, because I'm an empath. So I feel what you feel. And that has helped me in life, but it feels like a burden that's really a strength. Women have it, believe it or not, more than men. And this is not like a sexist thing, but women are comfortable feeling their feelings more than men are. It's just something, a lot of men feel that it's unmasculine to feel their feelings. But I talk a lot about sensitivity. It's not at all. It makes you a kinder person, that's all. And, you know, a lot of doctors act very gruff. Their bedside manner is not as nice as nurses. Nurses are the ones that really nurse you back to health. When I was in the hospital, the doctors come in maybe once a day, but nurses spend a lot more time with you, which is why a lot of them learn healing through touch. They learn therapeutic touch, because just a simple touch on someone's shoulder can make them feel calm. But a lot of doctors, because they deal with life and death, they're afraid that it'll overwhelm them. And to protect their sensitivity, they make themselves withdraw. So there was a time in my life, if I was with you and you were sad, I was sadder for you than you were. I overfelt my feelings. I'm like an antenna for feelings. And what I had to learn was I had to create a boundary, because it made me not effective. I had to back away because it was too painful. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was that I cared too much. I cared so much that I couldn't be able to help you because it was too painful for me. So these are things that I had to learn. And these are things that I lecture on and that I talk about. And that's why I gave you guys my email, because if people have questions, I want you to feel free. Not everybody likes to talk publicly, but sometimes they like to talk privately, you know? And that's the reason that I call them my happiness series, because it's very important to me. Oh, you got them both. Thanks,
I
Steve.
got them both.
Yeah, that's so awesome. It's very important to me to put that message out to the world, that it's about our thinking and not about things that people have said to you that hurt you in some way, that we need to get past that so that we can become the superstars that we were meant to be.
Yeah.
So please continue with your questions.
Okay, Cody has a question for you.
Okay.
Jeffrey, hi. I just wanted to quickly tell you, I was not able to almost come on this call tonight, but I'm so glad that I did, because what you were talking about tonight just matched so much of a connection to my life. And you know, Alicia knows this, Deneen, Michael, I've shared this with the class on numerous occasions, that I had a very serious stuttering problem growing up. And you know, as you know, it hinders you in so many ways, and you feel like you're in a jail, and it is a speech disorder that people just don't really understand. And having you here and seeing somebody that is not only in the industry, but is also in the medical field as well, and is just so entranced in his focus and what he wants in life. You know, I stuttered severely in high school, and I'm a TV reporter for BronxNet TV now, and I'm you know, in the industry. And when people, you know, like telling people that, people are like, I cannot believe that you had this speech disorder, that you stammered. And you know, I just wanted to tell you how much I connected with you on that level. I have a master's in psychology, and just learning and being a counselor to people, and just understanding that connection in life, that you have to have that confidence within yourself. You can't you can't hold on, and you can't hope for somebody to give it to you. And that helped me to overcome stuttering and stammering, and sharing that with the class, and with, you know, Deneen and Michael and Alicia over the months, and having that be what I want to give to the world, that even having your soul trapped in some type of jail cell, because stammering is like a jail cell within yourself. You feel like you can't get out. Having and overcoming that through telling myself, Cody, you are confident. Just be who you are. And the stories you were talking about in high school, I played sports, I sang, I acted. And when I sang in front of my school, or when I acted on stage, or all of these things, I didn't stammer, you know, and that was the window that I needed. But I just wanted to tell you, you, it's like I feel like I could almost cry, because you spoke to my soul in so many ways. And I wasn't going to be on this call tonight. I wasn't able to make it, but I'm so glad I did. And something told me that I should try to make it tonight. And I'm so glad I did. I will email you for sure. I'd love to just have you here, just more about my life in general, in terms of the way it connects to yours. But thank you so much.
I can't tell you how happy I am to hear your message. It's so powerful. You sound wonderful, by the way. And, you know, I don't know you, but I'm proud of you, because it's a very difficult thing to overcome. And as we did it, other people can do it too. And that message needs to come out. So many stutterers don't pursue anything in life. They let it stop them. They don't get the job they want. They don't meet the person that they would like to meet. They hold themselves back. And it's a metaphor for obstacles in general. We all have some kind of obstacle to overcome. Nobody's perfect. And it just shows you that, you know, there's something called the serenity prayer. And it's grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the most important line, and the wisdom to know the difference. So if I wasn't given the grace to be given the wisdom to know that stuttering was not something that I couldn't overcome, I'd still be stuttering today. You don't have to accept things that you can change. There are things about ourselves that we cannot change, that you must accept, or it'll drive you crazy. But acceptance is only for things that you cannot change. And so, again, that was a wonderful thing. Thank you so much, Cody. Let's continue.
Johnny Regis has a question.
Sure.
Well, thank you once again for sharing everything. But to make a connection with everything you just said, it's literally, I did not know how this coaching was gonna go. At work today, I was talking mostly about everything you just said to another coworker. And when you said the universe aligns you, with the people you need to meet, and boom, here I am, and hearing the same thing almost what I
Mhm.
was talking with my coworker. But as same as Cody, we share the same kind of story. I may not be open too much about those things, but I went through them, and one thing I always make sure I do is I don't quit on myself, no matter what.
Mhm.
It may be down, down. I make sure that person remains strong at heart and in mind. So I want to say thank you for sharing all that.
Thank you so much. Also, very meaningful that none of us got here by accident. So the universe drew you here. Like Cody said, he almost wasn't going to be able to make it, but then he heard something that he needed to hear. And we all need to be reaffirmed. You know, sensitive and creative people, especially, we need to be reaffirmed because sometimes we tend to doubt ourselves because people give us doubts about ourselves. And sometimes we wonder, are they really true? These things that they're saying, they're giving us, people are very willing to tell you things that will weaken you. I believe in telling people things that will strengthen them.
I
Oh,
agree.
And it's really so nice that you had a talk like that with your coworker because I never know what people talk about, but it's very rare. You can't have this kind of conversation with everybody in the world. You
Yep.
can only have you can only have this kind of conversation with like-minded people. And I
Yep.
took it for granted that if they came through Alicia, that it would be an audience of like-minded people and that I could share these kind of things. Because unfortunately, not everyone in the world is open to this. But if you are open to it, it'll change your life in a lot of good ways. And it's good for us all to know each other that way, because that's what forms a community. And when you have a community of like-minded people, you strengthen each other, you reaffirm each other, which is important in every field, but especially in the entertainment field, especially to have a bond with other people and to know that you're not crazy. And that, because
You know, I get called that a lot,
yeah,
and I
well,
would say,
because when you're unique, when you're different, when you're unique, like if you saw my documentary, people always talk about my look is my brand, that's how people know me. And it just evolved that way. And it's important to find out what makes you unique and different and cultivate that and not be afraid. We don't all have to fit into a mold. That's why I said I hate stereotypes. People shouldn't be able to look at you and know all about you. That's why
one
I
thing
draw.
I always put inside my head is I know for fact everyone out there is living a different reality. I should not judge them based on that because each and every one of us is living in a different reality. But when you come across each other, it's the working of the cosmos. That's what I
Right.
always believe.
And we recognize each other. People see it. You can feel it from another person, and then it gives you a sense of comfort. And that's why, if it wasn't pandemic, we could all give each other a big hug.
Yep.
But for now, it has to be virtual, a virtual hug to everybody who's here. It's just so great that so many people showed up. Um, what other questions are there?
I'm gonna give Savannah the floor because she had her hand up for like half the call and then
Sure.
So
Hi.
Hi. Oh, wait,
Oh,
okay. Well, I see you on the bottom. Okay, Savannah Wang. Okay.
hello, Jeffy Gurian.
Hi.
Um, thank you so much for being here. First of all, I really, really enjoy and like your energy. And I do have a question. Like, when there are times when you feel down or maybe not as inspired,
Mhm.
um, is there a routine that you kind of lean towards to get your mind out of a funk? Besides the thing that you're talking about canceling and just verbally saying those words, is
Mhm.
there like a physical routine that you turn to that you can do to kind of
Yeah.
zap you out of that?
In order to change your mood. Well, look, what you're talking about basically is being human. We're
Yeah.
all gonna have, we're all gonna have weird days. When like one of the things that I teach, and that's in my book, I teach everybody to create their own happiness center. And what I mean by that is when you leave your house, you're at the mercy of whatever the universe has in store for you. When you walk out of your house in the morning, whether you walk left or right, your whole life is going to be different. When you walk right, you might find $100 bill. You walk left, you might trip and fall and hurt your knee, right? But you can't overthink that. Whichever way you go is the way you're meant to go. So some days are going to be weird. Some days you're going to feel sad and you're going to feel depressed. And that's part of being human. And it's also part of being an entertainer. Because again, if you're any kind of a performer, you're functioning on a level of sensitivity that most of the world doesn't get. They don't understand it. You feel things very deeply. I'm sensitive to color, to weather, to the people around me, to my room. I'm sensitive to everything. Everything affects me. And sometimes you could be feeling something from someone else. It doesn't even have to be you. You could be sad because of what someone else is feeling. So what I do, first of all, I pray, and this is not a religious thing again. It's asking the universe for guidance. So when I start my day, first I thank them for not having pain, because I've had physical pain and because I survived a heart attack and COVID double pneumonia and like a lot of weird stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I say a prayer of gratitude and I ask for guidance throughout the day to do whatever. I'm like, you could call it nature or the universe or God, whatever is convenient for you. But it's not a religious way. It's, everybody believes their own thing. I'll explain this briefly. Religion can be wonderful for people, but it tends to divide us because it puts you in a category and other people are automatically outside that category. And what spirituality does, spirituality brings us all together because all it asks is that you believe in a force greater than yourself. If you think that you're running your own life, then you tend to blame yourself when things don't go the way you would like them to. So we all have goals. And if you're finding it hard to achieve your goal, some people say, oh man, I'm like the ultimate victim of the universe. Nothing ever works out for me. It works out for other people, but when I want it, I don't get it. But the way you're supposed to think is, if I didn't get the thing I wanted, it's not because I'm being punished. It's because I'm supposed to have something better than that. And if I got the thing I wanted, I wouldn't be available for the really good thing that's coming to me. But I have to have patience because it's not coming right away necessarily. And as human beings, we lack patience. We want everything when we want it. That's just our nature. So there's a lot of learning. I call these spiritual principles. And it's important to incorporate them into your life. So when you're in a bad state, when it feels like nothing is going right, you have to do something like write a gratitude list. You have to physically, not think it, but you have to take out a piece of paper and write down things that you're grateful for in your life. And it could be things as simple as that you can see and you can hear and you have all your senses and you're healthy and you can walk and you have
You're above ground.
and you have an apartment to live in and your rent is paid and you have a job. You have to make a list because there's a lot of people in the world that don't have that. And so you have to be grateful for what you have. And any time that I've been engaged, self-pity is one of the worst things that we can engage in our lives. And anytime I've engaged in that, the universe puts some unfortunate person in front of me to remind me how lucky I am. I see somebody in the street that's in really bad shape, and I say, there, but for the grace of God, go I. So it's about perspective,
Yeah.
One of the sayings in my book is that you can't change your past. The only thing you could change is your perspective of your past. How you look at things is very important. So, of course, we're all going to have down days. We're going to have weird days. I have that, but I work through it because I've had a lot of good things in my life. And I can't be that selfish that I have to think that every day is supposed to be spectacular for me.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I wrote these books, because I needed to put these thoughts down and share them with people, because my feeling is that we're given obstacles to overcome in our lives, not to make our life difficult, but so that we can use that to help other people. So if I tell you my story about the stuff that I had to go through, someone here might relate to it. I don't know everybody's life, but you never know what you say. It could be something that you think is so simple, and someone else could really need to hear that day, and it changes their life. I've had people come up to me and remind me of something I don't even remember saying that I said years before, and they said they always hold on to that because that helped them. And I don't even remember saying it, but they remember it, and that's what counts. That's why these kind of things that we're doing are so important, because
Yeah.
when you share something that you've been through and you were able to overcome it, maybe you have something like that in your life, and that'll help you as
Yeah.
well, you know? So I hope that
Definitely.
answered your question.
It definitely did. And
Cool.
I just have one more comment.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed your bagel sock joke, and I
Cream
just
cheese on the
wanted to
ankles.
let you know because I laughed out loud when you commented that.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, cream cheese on the ankles. You know, to this day, Alan Zweibel remembers that. It's decade, because
It's genius.
if you put two things together that don't go together, people remember it. And I've taken memory classes, and they actually teach that. I didn't do it purposely. That's just how I think. I like absurd humor, like Monty Python kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
I wrote a book called Man Robs Bank with His Chin, and it's a whole book of very unusual stories like that.
Rob's bank with
And,
his
Man Robs Bank with His Chin. Yeah, it's a very serious book, as you might imagine. But it's filled with very bizarre stories. So if you like absurd comedy, it's also on Amazon. All my books are on Amazon.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Who else has a question?
Sarah.
Sarah, where's Sarah?
I'm right here.
Oh, hi, Sarah.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
My question is, what motivates you, and what sort of like made you realize that you're not your disability, and like what motivate you to sort of become able to think outside of that, instead of seeing like, oh, this is part of who I am, and just sort of like becoming like, oh, thinking negatively about yourself. Like, what started you on that journey?
Some of it is a gift, I believe. I started when I was just a child. When I was 7 or 8 years old, at that very young age, I already knew that I could take away certain pain with my hands. And I would do it on myself and my little sister. Like if she had pain, I would just put my hands on it and take away, which is a really weird thing, because my parents didn't know anything about that. And it just came to me. It was intuitive. And a lot of things in my life were intuitive. It's one of the things that opened me up to the concept of past lives. Sometimes little children get gifts. Like you read about these like 5-year-old piano prodigies, or they could play the violin at 3 years old. And to me, it just makes sense that it could possibly come from a previous existence. I opened my mind to that. So I was always given, since I was a child, I always looked at life on different levels. I always saw that there was more to life than just what you saw on the surface. And I was always fascinated by that. And so when things came to me, like I always wondered why I've always had to confront all these fears, like what that was about. I never came to a complete answer, but as I said earlier, it's not important to ever figure out exactly why. It's important to look at all the possibilities. So I was given this knowledge that things don't have to be the way they seem. And I've used that all throughout my life. So I try and inspire myself. I can never waste time. If you read my bio or whatever, it looks like I've done many things. And truthfully, on some days, I feel like I haven't accomplished anything. And people say to me, what are you, crazy? Look at all the stuff that you do. But I'm very hard on myself that way. I'm like this A-type person. I can't waste a day. I always feel like I have to do something creative every single day, whatever it is. It could be something small, but I just feel like I have a mission, that God saved me in a lot of ways. I got through this COVID thing. That was really weird. So many people didn't. I was very lucky. I consider it grace, because I was really sick. I was sick for 2 months, and I could have just sat around the house feeling sorry for myself. But I realized how grateful I should be. And that's when I wrote that book. You know, I used the time of being inside because I mean, look, so many of us haven't been out of the house much for like 10 months. It's crazy. People, we're social animals. We're not meant to be alone and isolated. We need other people around us, you know? And there's so much fear. We're talking about fear. Fear is inside of us now because of this pandemic. People are experiencing fear. The kind of fear that I wrote about is a different kind of fear. It's the kind of fear that wants to stop you from accomplishing things. But in a way, it's related to this fear. I have fear inside my body. There are certain things that trigger the memories of when I had to go in the ambulance to the hospital. Sometimes at night, I don't feel that great. And the fear comes back, like, am I getting this thing again? And I didn't go anywhere, so I wasn't with anybody that I could catch it from. But the fear is trapped inside of me. And I have to remind myself, it's not possible. Don't let your mind take you there, because our minds are so powerful that you can actually make yourself sick. That's what psychosomatic illness is about. You can create an illness. A lot of people that are cancer phobic wind up developing cancer because that's all they think about. Thought is so powerful that you can draw things into your life by thinking about them. That's why you have to try and stay away from thinking about negative things, because you can actually draw it into your life through the power of your thought. So I hope that answered your question to the best of my ability.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. I have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So if people have a question, but again, anybody who didn't ask can write to me, you know, and I hope that you'll check out the books. I really do, because if this resonates with you, it's all in there. That's what I put in there. And it's always good to have a guide to help you. And I'm not just doing this just to try to sell books. I wrote them for a reason. I have 7 books, but the first 5 are really about comedy and not about things that'll change your life. But these 2 books, I feel like they're really important, and they were books that I was meant to write to help people. And that's why I think they're, you know, doing so well, because people are resonating with the information. And have you any idea how hard it is to get a dog to sit in lotus position?
I was wondering how the heck.
That's a meditating dog. You're not gonna see that. Floating on an orange pillow. An orange is the color of the 2nd chakra. So are there any other questions?
Yep, Marnia has a question.
Well, yes, it's besides to thank you for being here, not just here in the Zoom, like in the world. You're a very beautiful soul and person. I mean, we believe that we all connect with you, with your thoughts and your emotions. The empathy you have is just amazing, and the courage you have to overcome you conquer your fears definitely teaches how to not be afraid of what we can do. So that's why we are joining also VIP, because somehow we have that thought in the back of our minds, and definitely it requires a little bit of courage, definitely to overcome and be able to pursue our dreams. And kind of the question, I just wondered if you ever heard of the lucid body technique.
Spell it for me.
Lucid body technique for acting.
No, I have not heard. And it's funny. I did lectures for actors at a big studio in Manhattan, but I've never heard of that. What is it about?
It's a technique that teach you about the chakras and how you can use them to be a better actor. I just took that class a month ago, and it was very, very interesting, very hard, because you put your emotions through it.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
you were talking about the chakras, and to me was a very, very nice tool to have as an actor. And also I just wanted to talk about that. Maybe you haven't said that, but all of this is related to the emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
I believe that emotional intelligence is one of the most important assets you can have as a human being, because more than being smart per se, you know, like knowing a lot of things, I think the emotional intelligence is what you're talking about, right?
Well, emotional intelligence is the equivalent of cellular memory. It's something that I didn't really mention, but very important for actors. Simply means that every single thing, and it's fascinating to me, absolutely fascinating. It simply means that every single thing that you've experienced since you're born is still inside of you. Every sense that you experience, everything you experienced in your senses. It's the reason why you could hear a song that you like and it'll remind you of the boy or girl you liked in the 3rd grade. Or you smell a perfume and you'll be like, wow, my kindergarten teacher wore that perfume. It takes you back in a millisecond. There's no thought involved. It's like a sensory deja vu. And it's a very important thing to use in acting. So if you have to bring up tears, you can relate to a time in your life when you were very sad. You can feel it if you think about it, or you look at a picture. It takes you right back. So cellular memory is a very, very important thing. And I work with that in my work. When I do my energy healing, I work on a lot of people that have what they think are migraine headaches, physical pain caused by stress. When I joined, like for the last 20 years, I've been on the board of something called the Association for Spirituality and Psychotherapy. And I taught psychotherapists what to look for. When you're working with people who are sad or depressed, very often they have physical symptoms. They wake up in the morning and their neck is tight. They feel, or their back hurts, or their jaw is tight, or they get headaches. A lot of women talk about having fibromyalgia. And there's a lot of thought about that because, as I said, women are gifted with a sensitivity that often feels like a burden instead of a strength. People are very willing to tell you, oh, you're too sensitive. And that's BS. And I hate when people say that. You're just as sensitive as you're supposed to be. And the people who are saying that to you, you don't need to know people like that. If they tell you that you're too sensitive, it's because they're not honoring your sensitivity. When people say that, they're usually making a joke at your expense, right? And what I tell them is like, if I say something like, oh, I was just kidding. And I'm like, yeah, well, I have a pretty good sense of humor. What was the joke? And they never have a good answer because there was no joke. They were just saying something in a roundabout way to try to hurt your feelings or to weaken you in some way. You know?
Yeah, but the thing about that, I'm sorry to interrupt. I believe that feelings require a lot of courage because you're able to be vulnerable, you know, and feel. It's not easy to just go around in the world and be able to feel all of that emotions because it takes a little bit of you. But I mean, you need to be very brave to expose that, right?
Feelings,
I see it.
feelings take courage, but an important saying is also is that feelings are not facts.
True.
And just because you feel something doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, and it doesn't mean that it's going to last forever. When I used to be sad, I felt like I would be sad for the rest of my life. I didn't understand that tomorrow could be completely different.
Another day.
Because when you're an empath and when you feel what other people feel, the feelings are so intense that you tend to believe them. But you have to understand it's your response to something around you.
Yeah.
So it's important to know that feelings are in facts. It's brave to be able to share your feelings when we're talking. When I talk to people, I try and share honestly. I try and share things about my life that make my hands sweat. It's very easy to share things about yourself that anybody could say. But when I work with people in sessions, you know, some of my sessions are 3 hours long because when I work with people, I don't believe in 45-minute sessions. Most psychotherapists, like I'm not a classically trained psychotherapist, but they accepted my work. And I tell them, most psychotherapists will see you for like 40, 45 minutes. What are you supposed to accomplish in that time? You can't establish trust in 45 minutes. I'll see people for 3 to 4 hours when they first come to me because I share my life with them as well as asking them about their life. Because if you don't trust me, you can't tell me what's really bothering you. You're not going to feel comfortable sharing with me. But if you know that I understand you and I went through with what you're going through, then I can help you. What I tell stutterers, yeah, I'm not a speech therapist, but it it doesn't mean you have to have a heart attack to be a cardiologist. You don't have to have every disease in order to treat it. But when it's something psychological or emotional, it helps if you can talk to somebody who's been there and overcame it. And that is very helpful. So again, so it is very brave to be able to share your feelings, but it's also important to know that feelings are not facts. And just because you feel that way today doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily feel that way tomorrow. Especially if it's a bad feeling. Good feelings can be facts, but bad feelings don't have to be facts. Anybody else?
Yeah, we're going to close out with Jay Hendrickson.
Okay.
Hey, Jeffrey.
Hey.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
And I just wanted to say to you that your documentary, what you shared, really, really spoke to me. I'm kind of like Cody now. I could just burst in tears because you spoke to the heart of us as a person. And that's kind of what we have on this journey with VIP. Every boot camp, every class, every training, everybody speaks to our heart, and not so much just, us, but they speak to our heart. So it gives us a lot to take away, to learn, and to evolve into what we're trying to be in this industry. So I wanted to say thank you for that.
And I guess you're very welcome. I guess we should end. It's 2 hours.
Yeah.
But I'm enjoying this. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
No, it was tremendous. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And again, my email is jeffrey@jeffreygurian.com. And if there's anybody that wants to contact me, you're welcome to do it. I will get back to you. I'm really good at that. I'm happy to see all your smiling faces. That's very, it's very reaffirming to me, and I'm so happy that this resonated with you. Even the people that didn't turn on their cameras.
Next time we'll work on that, Jeffrey, I promise.
I hope we get to do this again. I would really enjoy that. Alicia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You and your beautiful baby. And Deneen, we'll talk every few minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay? All right.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you.
Good
Good
night,
night.
everybody.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Good night.
I'd love to hear from you. So if you have any comments, please comment, like, or subscribe to this channel, because it's a new channel and I can use all the support that I can get. And if you want to send an email, well, you can comment or you can send an email to me at jeffrey@jeffreygurian.com. That's it for me. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I wish you lots of happiness. See you soon. Bye-bye.